Hello and welcome to Lesson 6 in the Intuition Connection Summer School with me, Ruth Ann Richards. I'm the creator of the Intuition Connection and author of Reclaim Your Intuition. I believe that we've lost that connection to our intuition, and I think it's really important because when we are deeply connected to our intuition, we feel empowered, and when we're empowered, life gets easier. And I would love more of us to feel that way. It feels good. And because I want more people to reclaim their intuition and find that connection, I'm hosting this free summer school this year. So we're on to lesson 6 today, which is about embracing the divine feminine and why it's important in the world right now. But I just want to recap the past few weeks, whether you've watched all the lessons or not. But over the past few weeks, we've talked about what is intuition. So hopefully you're starting to shape your own view about what you believe intuition is, what you believe about the otherworldly, and one concept of the otherworldly feels right for you as an adult. You've learnt about the principle of coherence, when heart, body, mind and soul are all in agreement. That's amazing empowerment to feel. Hopefully as well you've got back on track with manifesting. We've busted some myths about manifesting, and last week I shared with you my proprietary goal setting method, an alternative, spiritual alternative to goal setting called the CAT method, no, activate and trust. I use it, and I use it with most of my clients as well when we need to. So hopefully now you're well on your way to understanding more about intuition. Maybe it's a little less scary than it used to be, and you're well on your way to reclaiming it. So this week we're going to get a bit more deep and meaningful as we explore the divine feminine as part of reclaiming your intuition, and also to help us change the world around us. There's a new way of being needed in the world. We need some things to change in the world. And I believe, and I'm guided, that embracing our divine feminine is one way to do that. So I'm going to be looking at my notes throughout this because I can so easily go off at tangents. So if you see me looking down, don't be put off. I'm just sticking to what I need to tell you. So find your comfortable place, get your cuppa, a notebook and a journal, and a pen if you want to. And here we go with embracing the divine feminine. So what the heck is the divine feminine? It's a great question and one that I've pondered. And what I'm going to do is share with you what I've been given from one of my spirit guides about the divine feminine, the idea of a divine or sacred female and male, because it feels so intangible, doesn't it? What is it? And I've asked for guidance in very practical terms to help us humans better understand the concept. But before I do, I think there's something that we need to address about the use of the words feminine and masculine. Because being and living in a divine or sacred way is not about gender. It is about our way of being and how we are in the world, regardless of how we identify or feel about our gender. So that divine or sacred way of being and how we are in the world, I call it an essence. It's a divine essence. It's not about whether we're male or female. It's about what's inside of us. And you might want to call it spirit. I call it essence. And that essence may shift and change during our lifetime as we respond to situations and circumstances in our life, and as we learn new things and have new experiences. Take me as an example. I am a female, a woman. That's how I describe myself. But at this phase and stage of my life, I would say that my essence is far more sacred and divine feminine than perhaps divine maleness. But in previous phases and stages of my life, my essence has probably been more that of a divine maleness. That doesn't mean my gender was any different. I was still a female and a woman. But my essence of being, how I was in the world, was different because my situation and circumstances and work were different to what they are now. I've been the same person all the time, but my way of being in the world has shifted back and forth. And indeed, it's likely that at some points in my life, my essence was half divine female and half divine male, because that was how I needed to be in the world. And I would love to bust the myth that only women can have or be the essence of the divine female or feminine, and only men of the divine male. So let's bust that myth that we are one or the other. We can be and experience more than one essence, both essence at the same time. So perhaps you're familiar with the yin and yang symbol. It's like two fish spooning, and one part is white and the other part is black. But within the white part, there's a little black circle. It looks like an eye. And within the black part, there's a little white circle. And that yin and yang kind of describes two different essences as well. One of receptivity, being open and allowing, one of action and doing. But within each of them, there is a little bit of the other. And that's why we're never completely one thing. Now, I can be quite linear in my conscious mind thinking. So I think of the divine masculine and feminine on a continuum. So let's say here is a divine or sacred feminine, and here is a divine or sacred maleness. And actually, we just shift along this line. As I said about my experience in life so far, I've probably shifted along this line. And perhaps somewhere in the middle, we experience both essences and we be both essences. We be divine feminine and divine male at the same time. Because it's not about our gender, it's our spirit, our essence, and our way of being. But at other times, you may be stronger to this end, and other times stronger to that end. So I hope that helps get away from the idea about we're talking about gender, because we're not. We're talking about an essence, a way of being, and a vibrational frequency. So I hope that helps us get started with the divine feminine. So if you're saying, thanks Ruth for clarifying the point about gender, but I'm still asking what the heck is the divine feminine, I'm going to answer that now. I'm about to read something to you which was given to me by a spirit guide very recently, just in the past couple of months, about the divine feminine. So it outlines the concept of the essence of the divine feminine. The divine feminine is a sacred way to be. Everyone has the potential to illuminate the divine feminine from within. The divine feminine has courage. The divine feminine is unflinching in the face of conflict. The divine feminine shows compassion when hate is all around. The divine feminine elicits truth in every situation. The divine feminine has no need to speak, as her essence reaches all. The divine feminine puts love above all. The divine feminine is Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Gaia. The divine feminine is Gaia, and Gaia is the divine feminine. The essence of the divine feminine is everywhere and demands to be seen, heard, and felt. The divine feminine is a way of being at all times towards all, healing the wounds of the planet, and yet still filled with soulful rage and sacred activism. The divine feminine does not demand, she expects. The divine feminine has no rush, all in the right time. The divine feminine cannot be injured. Compassion is her shield. The divine feminine cannot be hurt. Love is her warrior call. The divine feminine sees through the lies and beyond to the truth. The light of the divine feminine is born out of the darkness of mortals. The power of the divine feminine is the light of creation and the light born of mortal darkness. Nothing in the mortal or spirit world can darken this power. The power of the divine feminine is to be cherished and guarded soulfully. The power of the divine feminine can never be abused, no matter how a human tries to abuse the power of the divine feminine for their own gain. It cannot be done. So as you can tell as I'm reading that, that's not my natural style of writing or speaking, so you can tell that has been shared with me from a spirit guide. But let me try and sum this up for you. So the essence of the divine feminine is courage. It's moving beyond hate. So we don't respond to hate with more hate, to conflict with more conflict. We respond with compassion. We listen. We seek to understand. We ask questions to elicit the truth. And when we use our intuition, we know what the truth is without asking. So we can be more compassionate about the questions that we ask to allow people to tell their truth. And I love the idea that we don't demand. We don't demand change. We don't demand that things improve and get better. We expect, and there's a very strong vibrational frequency difference there. Demanding is kind of low vibrational frequency because you're trying to force something to happen. But expecting change, expecting to save the planet, expecting people in authority to do better has a much higher vibrational frequency. So we should expect people to do better rather than demand it. And also compassion and love is important, lightness. So this idea of the darkness of mortals, it sounds, I don't know what it sounds like, a bit medieval, but it's about humans who are trying to abuse the power of the divine feminine, and in that they are abusing women and men. So those of us who are compassionate, they think we can be taken advantage of, and that's not true. Because we tell the truth, people kind of run away from us because they can't cope with that. So this idea of the divine feminine power being abused, it can't be abused. It's always going to find a way forward. So I'm going to let you process that, but there's something else I'd like to read to you now as well. So I have written my own oracle, Reclaim Your Intuition, and in there is a message of an earthly matriarch, which is also about the divine feminine. And I want to read this to you because this may resonate more with you. The earthly matriarch is the manifestation of the divine feminine on this planet. Contrary to scientist thinking, an earthly matriarch possesses unflinching courage, advocates soulful rage, and understands the appropriate use of sacred activism. The divine feminine raises her voice and speaks her truth for humanity and the planet. The divine feminine permeates through the collective consciousness, waiting patiently for enough single human voices to find her until they can manifest a collective divine feminine voice on the earthly planet. Such a change in the world, to bring forward a unified collective voice to represent the divine feminine on earth, is ready for a resurgence. Now is the time to speak your truth, call out the untruths, and stand firm in protecting Mother Earth and all those who seek the shelter of the divine feminine. Whether you're male or female, however you choose to identify gender for yourself, you are called to acknowledge the part of you that resonates with the divine feminine, and to use this as part of you for the voice of truth in your life, for you and others. The divine feminine is not about being a woman or woman-like. It is about what the divine feminine represents, which is truth, compassion, caring, living by your intuitive voice, and breaking with traditional ways that no longer serve the earthly planet and those living here. It takes immense internal strength to show compassion when others show hatred. It takes a full and loving heart to care when others turn a blind eye to the vulnerable. It takes trust to act on the inner intuitive voice, and it takes resilience to break with traditional ways. Earthly matriarchs exist on the planet with the purposes of caring for the planet, treating all people as family, teaching forgiveness, and gently allowing the truth to be seen clearly. So maybe earthly matriarch is a phrase that resonates with you. Maybe it's divine feminine or sacred feminine. You get to choose how you want to describe this concept. This idea of compassion, love, truth-telling, fearlessness in supporting, fearlessness in using love as an antidote to everything that's going on in the world. And maybe you feel like an earthly matriarch, or maybe you feel like a matriarch within your family. There is strength in that. There is more strength in that than we know. And more of us pulling together to do this is really important. So I hope these concepts start to give you an idea on the view of the meaning of the essence of the divine and sacred feminine, and start to help you shape what you want to believe. Now you have an idea of what I mean by divine feminine, at least, you can create your own view. You can start to understand why more of us illuminating this divine feminine essence is important in the world right now, because the world is pretty crazy right now. And I'm not going to dwell on those things that cause us fear or anxiety, because that's not the way of the divine feminine. That does not mean we have our heads in the sand and we're ignoring the issues in the world, or we're ignoring the concerns closer to our home or personal environment. It means we respond and we react in a different way. So conflict happens as a result of insecurity and fear. And the divine feminine response to that is one of peace, courage, and creating change. We expect higher standards and behaviours of those in authority or responsible for change, and we use our voice. We use our power of our voice to make this known. We stand up for what we believe and we speak our truth. We do not create more conflict, and we're not shouting and screaming. We speak peacefully in a measured and responsible way. Now, the change of more of us embracing and illuminating this divine feminine takes time. And because that takes time, it takes time to create the change needed in the world. But can you imagine more people responding with love and compassion in a measured way, without shouting and screaming, without creating conflict, by having discussion, asking questions, and gently uncovering the truth? What a wonderful place that would be. So it needs more and more of us to be doing this. I believe it happens in a grassroots way, with people like me and you talking about this subject, and everyone who watches this. We start to believe there can be a different way because it changes our behaviour, and once our behaviour changes, we role model and show to other people that there is a different way. And the more of us doing this around the world, the more change starts to take place. I have a group called the Intuition Circle, and every time we meet 3 times a month, and every time we meet, I say, just imagine there are groups of women coming together to talk about intuition and spirituality, how we embrace it in our lives and how we live practically. If there are groups of us dotted all over all parts of the world doing the same thing, imagine that really strong collective frequency we're creating to make change in the world. And it requires us to do some things on a very practical level, because so far this concept is intangible and it might feel pie in the sky. So how do we deal with this on a practical level? How do we get our voices heard? Well, it's about informing people when they use inappropriate language with you, when they talk to you in an inappropriate way, or they behave towards you inappropriately. You know, whether it's sexual overtones or abuse because of your gender. And beyond gender, all the other discrimination and abuses people around the world feel. And it's funny because the night prior to recording this, I was watching a quiz show, and there was a team that had 2 men and a woman. 3 times the woman said the answer to the question, and twice they ignored her. Eventually, on the 3rd time, because the men were getting nowhere with the answer, they took her answer. It was correct. At the end of that section of the quiz, the female presenter said out loud, "I noted that you said the answer 3 times before your colleagues heard you." It's a small example, yet an incredibly important and powerful one, of how women are not heard and how we have to keep repeating ourselves. And it's our time to deal with this, but not to keep saying our words and being ignored, but to ask questions. Ask, why are you ignoring me? Why do you not listen to me? It's a peaceful, constructive challenge. The more we do it, the more change happens. So you're starting to form your view of the divine feminine and why we need the change in the world. We need a different way of being. We need different processes and structures that benefit all of society and not just a particular section. And I cannot talk about the divine feminine without a note about the patriarchy. I used to say smash the patriarchy a lot, and I still think it in my head. But actually, for me, it's less about smashing the patriarchy now, and it's more about uplifting and raising the divine feminine and having more of that essence in the world and that feeling in the world. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about patriarchy and the construct as I understand it. So you can be on the same page if you want. Now, this is taken from my book, Reclaim Your Intuition. I use the word patriarchy to represent all those old-fashioned, outdated and traditional ways of the world, which were typically created and developed and ruled by a certain type of man, more specifically, a collective of this certain type of man, way back in history, back in the days, I would say, that had and gave no value to women, and certainly not to women with intuition. Think about the witch hunts, but that's a story for another time. That's why I have a script, because it'd be so easy for me to go off track. That's the patriarchy. Disliking the patriarchy and wanting changes does not mean that I don't like men or that we don't like men. If we look back through history, most of the patriarchal issues were created by men. But if we look to more recent times, including today, women can be part of the patriarchy too. They've taken on that essence, that patriarchal essence, because that's what they think they have to do, and they don't know there's another way. Just as women are frustrated and angry at patriarchal ways of being, there are men who feel the same. There are men, women don't get their voices heard, and men are expected to be a certain way. And when I was growing up, men were expected to be in the same job for their whole career and provide for their family. And, they could have been in jobs that they absolutely hated and detested, working for men who were part of the patriarchy. We all have some story within the patriarchy, regardless of our gender. Opposing the old-fashioned ways of patriarchy is not about men against women. It's about the divine feminine playing its part in the world, regardless of our gender. In my corporate career, I worked with men who constantly cut me off when talking, had no interest in what I had to say, patronised me and belittled me, and called me dear. Fortunately, though, I worked with many men who were compassionate, driven, thoughtful, wanted to do the right thing for the business and the people, and they had this enduring love for their families. They would put their families before work. That was the divine feminine essence in play, and they had intuition, although they would never have recognised it or admitted they had intuition, but they had this people radar. They knew instinctively when someone needed help, and they were willing to support. That's me, in retrospect, was the divine feminine in action. Men can dislike the patriarchy as much as women do, because it's about processes and systems that lock out certain sections of society and groups and only promotes one section of society. So think about jobs for the boys type mentality. They're frightened of bringing in anything that is different or diverse to what they are. The contemporary patriarchal society represents greed, cronyism, discrimination, and a complete lack of compassion. The contemporary patriarchy as we know it today is mired in the history of many previous dominant patriarchies. And it's time for something different, and we deserve better. And the divine feminine is on the rise, we're illuminating it, and this is how we make our piece of the world better. And with each of us making our piece of the world better, we create this collective frequency, a movement, this new world movement, to improve our lives, to save the planet, and to do the right things. So now you know what I mean by patriarchy, and I've contrasted that with men I've worked with who've demonstrated the divine essence. It's not gender, as I've said before. It's not about men versus women. It's about a certain way of being that needs to change. So I hope this explanation of how I view patriarchy has shown even further why the rise of the divine feminine, the way of being femininely divine, is more needed in the world right now. That's been quite deep and meaningful and spiritual, hasn't it? I've shared with you some of my innermost channeling from my spirit guide. I've shared something from my oracle, which is not available yet, but will be at some point. But we've looked quite deeply and meaningfully at the divine feminine. We've considered the history of patriarchy and how it's manifested the planet to its current state. But more importantly, what I hope you realise watching this is my explanation and exploring of the divine feminine, the way I've talked about it, you're already doing. It's as natural to you as breathing because it's your natural state. If you're a parent or a caregiver, you're likely filled with compassion and love, and you've probably learnt that it takes courage in our society to show and live with compassion. That's what the divine feminine is. She has courage. She's unflinching in the face of conflict. She responds with passion. All that you heard in that earlier section about what the divine feminine is completely within you. It's there. You may show these qualities every day. It is who you are. So if you take anything from this week's lesson, I hope it is that you feel valued, your compassion is valued, and to keep going, because the more of us doing it, the more we create the shift the world needs. The shift to compassionate living, to expect change, to have high ideals and standards. And if it gets difficult, just come back here and rewatch the section on what the divine feminine is. It's here to support you. Thank you for watching this lesson 6 in the summer school about embracing the divine feminine, how we cope and move beyond old patriarchal structures that no longer serve society. And watching it all the way through, I really appreciate it. I hope it's got you thinking. I hope it's changing and challenged some of your perceptions. And if you've got any questions about this or any other lessons in summer school, you can leave a comment, email me, or better still, join me for my live Q&A on Monday the 21st of August at 12 noon, and you can ask me any questions that you have then. Next week, lesson 7, our penultimate lesson, is about oracle messages and how to use them to access your intuition. And I love oracle messages, so I'm looking forward to that. I'll see you next time.